I finally reached the checkered flag on this custom Talladega Nights NASCAR pinball retheme. We're talking about NASCAR, so it's only fitting whip out the lawn chair. Got notes because there's a lot to talk about. Got this game a couple months ago in the middle of Arkansas. Posting popped up on Facebook Marketplace. $1,000. Sellers said it worked, but it had issues, and I was like, well, I'm looking for a new project. So jotted on down there, picked up the machine, brought it home, and instantly realized, yeah, it had some issues. If you're not already aware, this game started its life out in 2005 as a Stern Pinball NASCAR release. It was designed by Pat Lawler. The following year, 2006, is when Talladega Nights came out, and you know, ipso facto, hindsight being what it is, if they would have themed this around that movie and how successful it was and released this game, then it would have sold, you know, probably multiple times more than the units they sold on NASCAR. Obviously it did well enough for them because they had a reiteration special edition Dale Earnhardt Jr. version that had some different aesthetic and trim, but it was the same game, and they also released it under a different, you know, banner, if you will, Grand Prix for the overseas market. But it's a super fun game, albeit I don't think there's enough NASCAR pinball fans out there, or NASCAR fans that are also pinball fans, that really give this a fair shake, because it is a fun game, but it has some terrible music, it has some lackluster call-outs, and I think that just prevents it from being anything other than an average game. That's why I thought it was a perfect candidate to retheme and try to, you know, bump that fun level up and get it from being an average game to a good game / great game, depending on your affinity for Will Ferrell and his comedy stylings. All right, bear with me, gotta go over the notes. So, like I said, picked this up in a place in Arkansas. It was actually an auto body shop, which I thought was a, you know, a nice touch that they had a NASCAR pinball machine there. Been there for years. They said people didn't ever play it, rarely ever got used, and I can understand why, because it didn't actually allow you to play. It had electrical issues and board issues. It prevented it actually from, you know, ejecting the ball when you hit start the game. And if you tried to manually, you know, feed one up through the plunger and everything, certain things wouldn't activate, so you legitimately could not play the game. Got it home, cleaned it thoroughly because it was absolutely disgusting. Obviously years of negligence and abuse and just never being, you know, properly cared for. Definitely showed its signs. There was, you know, missing bolts and screws and loose wires and, you know, hack jobs galore on this thing. So I cleaned it top to bottom, inside and out. That was first and foremost. And then I started, you know, repairing, fixing, and updating certain things. So for whatever reason, at some point, somebody had added some LEDs, but only on the top side and really only around the slings in the end lane area. They had these really red and blue ones, and I thought those just looked hideous. So I got rid of those, put all Comet, you know, white LEDs for everything top and bottom for the most part. Changed out all the standard star posts. Now they're clear. Clear Titan silicone rubbers everywhere. Changed out the flipper bats. The original flipper bats were yellow, put white ones in here with, you know, blue silicone rubbers on there. I think it just looks nicer. There's a lot of, you know, white and blue throughout the playfield and everything. I think that color scheme looks better than the yellow. One thing to note, the left flipper bat, it was so locked into the actual, like, what, I don't know, the pawl, I think that's what it's called. The thing that holds the actual flipper bat itself, that I had to get a ball pen and hammer and eject that thing manually with brute force, because it was just so malformed that it would not let go of that flipper bat for me to change it. Put full set of Cliffies on this for the inlane drops, as well as the drop hole here in the middle of the little track area. It's a massive gaping hole in this game that gets a lot of abuse, so the Cliffies will protect that for many years to come. One oddball fact about this game, like I said, I picked it up in the place in Arkansas. When I got it home, opened her up and looked inside the machine, there was a giant lock on the actual coin box itself. So snipped that, actually opened the coin box, and lo and behold, found a couple bucks and quarters, as well as some Chuck E. Cheese tokens and an address on top of the coin box that said this was property of the Chuck E. Cheese headquarters in Texas at one point. No longer is that Chuck E. Cheese location, real, but I thought that was kind of neat that technically, I made some money buying this game. Like I said, I paid $1,000 for it. Found a couple bucks in the coin box, so technically I paid less than $1,000 for it. Even got some cool, Chuck E. Cheese tokens out of it, so that was a plus. The biggest initial hurdle, though, was just getting this to be a functional, operational game before I could even really start going down the road of the retheme. I had to do so much board work on both the power driver board as well as the MPU, more so than any game I've ever operated, messed with, tinkered on whatsoever, 5 times. Just on the power driver board, I had to replace 2 bridge rectifiers, 4 transistors, 3 resistors, and I had to remove a couple of hack jobs that I found where they'd spliced wires and had, lead connections running from one to another to bypass certain things. But I got it, and I got it fixed, and it's always nice when you can do it yourself. If you're not familiar, NASCAR has some of the most complex things going on inside of it, namely around the test car mechanism where it goes up and down. It's a bash toy. It's got a vertical up kicker. It's a scoop. It's got targets. And inside of that, it has a lot of mechanisms, wires and everything, very close together, moving in unison up and down, side to side, and getting moved around. So it's notorious for shorting things out in the process, and that's what has happened over the years because no one was taking care of this machine. Every time they kept just trying to forcibly operate it, it would short circuit something, and then down the chain it would create further problems. Got it all squared away, thank God. But yeah, that was a fun weekend with the multimeter and the soldering iron for sure. Replaced the batteries. When I got it, it had batteries and they were corroded. Luckily, it wasn't corroding on the board, which was nice, but for God's sakes, people, spend the $50 and buy NVRAM and put it in your game. The test car. So the original one is just like this molded plastic, grody looking gray thing. I always thought that was kind of hokey. I understand why they did it. It's meant to, get a steel ball bashed into it repeatedly, so you don't want to make anything too aesthetically pleasing. But I found there was actually a big NASCAR store in my area, so I went inside and I found a couple of die-cast cars that were, almost identical size and shape and everything. So I replaced the test car, put the actual die-cast car in there, and I actually have a small piece of polycarbonate that lays underneath the test car, and the test car is just far enough back to where the ball will actually hit that piece of polycarbonate, which is incredibly strong and, so much stronger than acrylic or anything like that. It's made to, get smashed around. I played 100 plus games on this already, never had an issue with the polycarbonate chipping, cracking, doing anything, so it'll definitely stand the test of time. Plus, it prevents it from actually hitting the die-cast car there. Unfortunately, they don't make any Talladega Nights themed car that size. It's either very little or very big. So I couldn't put an actual Talladega Nights car in that test car spot, which is what I really wanted to do. But I went with the 1993 Daytona pace car. I like the look of it, I like the color scheme. It had the red, white, and blue and everything. So I thought it was, a nice touch. Made my own shooter rod for the game. The original one, just standard black OEM one. Smashed the end off of it, and then I got an actual shift knob that's a 5-speed and has the F-bomb on it, which is very on brand for old Ricky Bobby here. I thought if he was to actually have a shift knob that wasn't restricted to PG-13 movie requirements, he would probably go with this one. So that's the one I went with. I think it's, again, ties with the silliness of Talladega Nights. There were some inner cabinet gouges on this thing, so like at some point somebody had clearly like lifted the playfield and had dropped it and got it off the rails, and then never like tried to re-straighten it or fix it. There's a metal bracket on the back of the playfield that got bent, and in doing so, every time somebody would raise and lift the playfield, it would literally dig and gouge into the side of the wall. So repaired all that. What else? Oh yeah, got rid of the chrome T-molding that comes on the back box, but blue, because I'm going with the blue theme here because there's tons of shades of blue on the playfield. Plus I just don't like that chrome T-molding. I think it looks kind of hokey, but it was 2005, everything was chrome back then. Replaced the standard DMD with a LCD color DMD. I'm the weird guy that likes the LCD solid color. I prefer it over dots, but you know, to each their own. The cool thing about the LCD version is if you like the dots, you can actually change the setting and make colored dots, but I like the solid look, personal preference. So the cabinet itself, all new artwork top to bottom. This had been out there for a couple of years because there was a couple of people on Pinside that, you know, tossed around the idea of, you know, retheming NASCAR to Talladega Nights. I'm definitely not the first person to come up with this, but somebody had already made this. This is, you know, one of the promotional images from the movie, but works out great as a back glass. So pick this up. You know, nice red, white, and blue America. Woo, go Ricky Bobby. Cabinet, sides, front, you know, back box, everything I designed. Just, you know, low-key stuff, nothing too crazy. There's very limited resources or options out there as far as high resolution, high quality images of the cast for this movie. You know, 2006, people didn't really care about promotional images, and, you know, Blu-ray and all that kind of stuff was in its infancy. So, you know, things like that didn't necessarily make it out there. But there's only, you know, so many images that are, you know, high resolution quality that you could stretch and blow up to this kind of size and scope. So I was limited in what I could really do, but, you know, just basic, you know, cast, characters, logo, blue, checkered, you name it, got it on there. DMD skin here, came up with, this is, you know, a snapshot from an actual Talladega Speedway race. Got the NASCAR driving on the track, you know, the grandstands, the crowd and everything. You know, wanted to tie it in there with Talladega Nights, of course. What else? Oh yeah, I made copious amounts of my own plastics. Definitely wouldn't recommend doing it my way, but it's just the resources I had available to me. So I made these all out of polycarbonate. Like I said, it's immensely stronger than acrylic and everything like that. Hand cut them all, basically scanned all the original plastics, and then made stencils, cut them out to shapes, water slide decals on all the polycarbonate, and replaced all the main, you know, plastic. So I got my slingshots, you know, just added some different characters, different images, replaced the truck, if you will, the hauler, made it Wonder Bread themed because, you know, obviously none of this stuff was Talladega Nights themed. You know, added an Applebee's sign over here on the tower. It's, you know, supposed to be like a NASCAR tower, but in reality it looks kind of like a restaurant because it's, you know, covering up the little diverter over here, and it's just windows and, you know, people behind the windows. So I'm like, hey, that kind of looks like a restaurant. And since Applebee's is, you know, an important part of the Talladega Nights movie, I was like, hey, let's add a, you know, an Applebee's sign there. And, you know, I also, you know, came up with, you know, decals for the aprons, you know, some instruction cards, little things here and there. Blue powder coating all around. Like I said, blue is, you know, kind of the aesthetic, the look, the theme and everything on this. Top to bottom, and that was honestly what's prevented me from posting this video in such a long time. My powder coating guy had my parts for well over a month and a half before I finally got them back. So I literally had this machine just sitting up on sawhorses, waiting, twiddling my thumbs, unable to play it, do anything with it until he finally got my powder coating stuff back. But he does a great job. It just takes a while. Top of the machine, came up with my own topper. I designed like probably 4 different variations of cabinet decals and artworks and everything. Made like 3 topper designs, and then ended up just kind of literally like flipping a coin to go with them because I was being so indecisive. But this is what I came up with. I got Ricky Bobby, you know, and Cal Naughton doing the old fist bump, shake and bake. In the background, I wanted kind of one of those like winner circle backdrops that you see at every NASCAR race, where it's got the sponsors, the name of the race and everything. So that's all back there. You know, it's RGB, you know, I can change the colors, whatever I want. The topper itself was actually created and made by This Ability Designs, my friend Angel. He does a great job. I'll link all this stuff in the video description box below. But I, you know, designed it in Photoshop, sent him the images, said, hey, this is the size, this is what I'm looking for. And like within a day, he had a mock-up and a 3D render that I could check out and say, this is awesome. And then he made it lickety-split, and it turned out perfectly. It's got a nice base to it and everything mounted on there. Just can't tell you how happy I was that, you know, he was able to make that for me, because I didn't want to try to hand cut something that big like I did with these smaller plastics, because it would definitely not look as good as what he made. Last little bits front, I replaced the original start button. It was just a tiny little red you know, LED button. Went with the oversized start button. Got, you know, Ricky Bobby start there. Coin decal sticker, you know, shake and bake with the NASCAR logo. Key chain itself, if you ain't first, you're last. Little little touches there, you know, new, besides the new power coating, everything, new leg levelers, new leg bolts, you know, cabinet protectors, little things here and there. This thing I'm actually kind of proud of. This is overkill by far, but this is where the traditional plug or the tournament button hole will sit. NASCAR is unique in that it has even a smaller hole than all the other games of this era that had that tournament button hole, and you can't even put a tournament button in it because it doesn't go into that lock bar. So you'd have to like finagle your own little tiny push button. So that's what I did. I finagled my own little tiny push button in there, drilled it into a die-cast car here that is Ricky Bobby Wonder Bread themed. So if I push the car down, it starts the tournament button, tournament mode, which I'll probably never use, but I wanted to make this as fully functional as it possibly could. And I just thought it looked, a nice little icing on the cake, if you will. Speaking of icing on the cake, I got to give a shout out to Pinstein on Pinside. The user was doing his own NASCAR Talladega Nights retheme, almost identical timing as I was. I reached out to him. I was like, hey, what are you doing? How you doing it? I'm doing a similar thing. And he was kind enough to offer his services, and he actually created some awesome decal artwork, because that was one thing I hadn't came up with yet and hadn't got around to, was replacing the imagery on the actual playfield. So there's NASCAR logo, and the cars that are on there are different actual NASCAR drivers, but he went out and made his own decal set that covers up all those, and they're all Talladega Nights. You got Jean Girard car, Cal Naughton Jr., and of course Ricky Bobby's Wonder Bread, and then you got the the me car, the Cougar. He came up with awesome decals that cover the playfield. I put them on there, installed them. They're super thin. I was worried, hey, is this going to affect the ball path and trajectory? Are these going to wear away? I played numerous games on them so far, and they held up so far great. You can't even tell they're there unless you really start really microscopically looking at the playfield and realize, oh wow, there actually is a tiny thin decal covering up what was under there. So he did an awesome job. He does a full Talladega Nights kit, everything you could possibly want. I went in a different direction, but either way, I bought his kit just because I wanted some spares and I want to support him because he was obviously doing some good work. But if you've got a NASCAR pinball machine out there and you want to kind of do similar to what we've both done, he's got an awesome kit for you. It comes up, he's got plastics, decals, everything, you name it, for the entire playfield. You can go balls to the wall. He did different cabinet artwork than obviously what I came up with, and it was really cool. The plastics he designed versus what I designed. It was neat to see, two different mindsets and what we came up with. But it's nice that I'll have a backup in case anything happens to mine. But definitely recommend his decals and his plastics if you're on the market for retheming your own NASCAR pinball machine. And the last thing that I really needed to do was I added a Pinsound board on here. That way I could change all the sounds, the call outs, the music and everything.
Do you know why I came to our
To have a chalupa and marvel at the wisdom of George W. Bush, and the same reason anyone comes to America.
Because like I said, that was one of the weaker points of this game to me, that really just made it a fun game, not so fun just hearing all that. So put the Pinsound on there, and I can't tell you how many hours dissecting the audio from Talladega Nights. And if you're not aware, there's multiple cuts of this film. There's not just a director's cut, an unrated cut. There's 8 different versions of this movie that were out there. They released different versions for different markets, and they didn't market it as some different cut of the film. So there's a lot of jokes and scenes that are included in certain movies that are not. I know that because I'm a super fan of this movie. So I went and got every version of this movie I could.
I'm Ricky Bobby.
Broke down all the audio, cut it into numerous clips. So I've got 70 unique call-outs from the movie, as well as a couple of interviews that the characters did on press tours for this. I've got 22 songs, several that are from the actual film soundtrack, and then several that are just on brand and on theme with NASCAR and Ricky Bobby as a person. A lot of it's Southern rock anthem type of things, Leonard Skinner, things Ricky Bobby would actually love. There's Charlie Daniels Band that's got a Talladega Night or a Talladega theme song about Talladega and NASCAR that fits perfectly to this. But yeah, that was the icing on the cake for me to make this truly an enjoyable experience. Since this is, you know, a YouTube copyrighted video, I'll have to like put a link up here to where you can kind of preview some of the sounds and call outs, so I don't get dinged on this video, because yeah, it's all copyrighted music and, you know, copyright sound clips and everything. But spent a ton of time editing, getting all those sound clips, and then putting them in certain parts of the game, and then trying to make sure that you didn't hear the same call out over and over, and it wasn't repetitive. And then I wanted to, you know, segue certain call outs to where they made sense. Like when you start the game, it has a couple of things that, you know, are starting your experience and make sense with the game. And when it ends, you know, it's got some nice little one-liners. Just, you know, really cool things. I replaced some of the jackpot sounds. The announcer from NBA Jam and a lot of the midweight games is also in this game as far as the OEM sound package, but they used him very sparingly, so it's like he was almost an afterthought. So I kept some of his stuff, also pulled some of his other stuff from other games, pulled random audio sounds from games like No Fear that had, you know, engine noises and other kind of NASCAR-centric sounds, put those in there, changed the multi-ball callouts, all that, you name it. Just overall changed the sound design through and through for this game to where it was Talladega Nights. Kept a lot of the original callouts that made sense for this game, because there's hundreds of them, and overall I think it turned out all right. And then lastly, the last few things I did the LED pop bumper caps for red, white, and blue. I replaced all my flasher red, white, and blues. Added, you know, an LED underneath the test car that's blue, so it looks, you know, stands out a little more during gameplay. You know, checker flag decals on all the wire form entrances, little brackets, things like that. Found some art blades for NASCAR theme out there. Picked those up because I think every pinball machine should have side art blades. The pin lights on this brightens it up. I'm sure the camera makes it look brighter than it really is, but they're a must-have in my opinion. Stadium lighting, affordable, economical, just awesome. I've got them on every single game in my house now. Highly recommend them. And yeah, just a lot of blood, knuckle broken, you know, sweat, labor going into this game, but
I spread my butt cheeks as Mike Holmes.
I'm happy with how it turned out. It's super fun to play now. It's enjoyable. I've seen Talladega Nights probably 900 times after editing everything and putting this sound package together, but overall, you know, I'm happy with it. I think it's super fun, and guys, let me know what you think. Do you think I just absolutely ruined a decent game? Do you think I made a decent game better? Let me know what you think about Talladega Nights, because like I said, I think it's hilarious. If you enjoyed the content, make sure you hit the like button, share this video with your friends if you found the information helpful, and as always, thanks for watching, guys. It really means a lot.